Diana Ross had never acted a single day in her life, and this movie almost buried her before it even opened. Get ready for 15 facts that expose the chaos hiding behind Lady Sings the Blues. You'll find out how a disastrous screen test somehow won an actor his career-defining role, and why a major studio tried to walk away from the whole production over money. And stick around, because the final fact involves a lawsuit that almost nobody ever talks about. So speed up with me, because the list starts now. Number 1. Opening credits contain an immediate historical error. The movie hasn't even properly started, and it's already bending the truth. That's how confident this opening really is. Lady Sings the Blues opens with Billie Holiday getting arrested for narcotics possession, and bold text stamps the scene as New York City, 1936. It's a gripping way to start a biopic. There's just one problem. It never happened that way. Billie Holiday's first real narcotics arrest didn't happen in 1936. It happened in May of 1949, a full 13 years after what the film shows you in its opening seconds. In the mid-1930s, the real Holiday wasn't sitting in a jail cell at all. She was working small clubs across Harlem, still building her name as a rising jazz vocalist. Most biographers agree her heroin use hadn't even started yet. That struggle didn't take hold until the early 1940s. So the film essentially rewinds her life story by more than a decade before the opening credits finish rolling. Why do that? The answer is structural. The screenwriters needed a frame. The whole movie is built as a flashback, with Holiday reliving her rise and fall while suffering through withdrawal in a padded prison cell. That device only works if the arrest happens early, so the timeline got compressed to serve the drama. It wasn't the only historical liberty the film took with her biography, but it's the one you can't miss. It's stamped in giant letters before the story has even begun, which means anyone who knows Holiday's real history catches the error before the first scene even finishes playing out. Number 2. Richard Pryor's role was expanded from one day. Richard Pryor showed up for exactly one day of work. He almost walked away without most audiences ever learning his name. Pryor was originally hired for a single day of filming, cast in a minor background role called Piano Man, a character meant to add color to Billie Holiday's world without ever becoming central to it. But the moment cameras started rolling, everyone on set realized they were watching something they hadn't planned for. Director Sidney Furie and producer Barry Gordy were floored by Pryor's natural instincts and, more importantly, by the electric chemistry he had with Diana Ross. So they made a call most productions never make. They started rewriting the script mid-shoot, expanding Pryor's part scene by scene so his one-day cameo grew into one of the film's most memorable supporting roles. Piano Man became a composite of real musicians who'd surrounded Holiday throughout her life. Part friend, part confidant, part steady presence through her hardest moments. Pryor did more than act, too. He helped Ross understand how people behave under the influence of drugs, drawing on his own lived experience to make those difficult scenes land with real authenticity instead of feeling performative. What started as a throwaway one-day booking turned into some of the emotional glue holding the entire film together. If you are enjoying this, take 2 seconds and leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. That support really motivates my work and helps a lot with bringing more content. Number 3. Billy Dee Williams had the worst screen test. Billy Dee Williams landed one of the biggest roles of his career after what may have been the single worst audition in the entire casting process. The filmmakers had serious contenders lined up for the role of Louis McKay, including Paul Winfield, who'd go on to earn his own Oscar nomination that same year for Sounder. Winfield's screen test was polished. Williams' test, by comparison, was a disaster. He showed up without his reading glasses. He forgot his lines completely. On paper, it was the kind of audition that ends careers before they start, not launches them. But when the footage got reviewed, something impossible to ignore jumped off the screen: the chemistry between Williams and Diana Ross. Screenwriter Suzanne DePass later admitted Williams probably delivered the worst technical screen test of anyone they auditioned, yet his connection with Ross overshadowed every mistake he made. Barry Gordy saw exactly what he needed. He wanted someone who could play what he called a black Clark Gable, a glamorous leading man that black audiences had rarely been given the chance to see on screen. Technical polish couldn't manufacture that. Chemistry could, and Williams had it in spades. A forgotten script and missing glasses almost cost him the role. Instead, they helped him get it. Number 4. Berry Gordy bought back the entire film. Berry Gordy loved this project so much, he ended up buying the entire movie back from the studio that was financing it. Paramount Pictures originally agreed to fund the film at a budget of $2 million. But Gordy demanded perfection in every detail, from the period costumes down to the meticulously rebuilt 1930s Harlem Street sets, and costs quickly spiraled far past that number. When Paramount studio head Frank Yablans found out the budget had ballooned by millions, he summoned Gordy to New York. Yablans made his position blunt. The studio wouldn't put another dollar into what he flatly called a black film. Essentially, Yablans told Gordy that if he wanted creative control, he'd have to buy Paramount out entirely. Most producers would have folded or compromised the vision to fit the smaller budget. Gordy did neither. Instead, he personally raised the remaining money and bought out Paramount's entire financial stake, handing Motown full ownership and total creative control over the production. Paramount stuck around only as the distributor, meaning they'd get the film into theaters but would never again have a say in how it was made. That gamble is a huge reason the film feels as ambitious as it does. Gordy bet his own money on Diana Ross and on this story, and it gave the production room to shoot without a studio looking over its shoulder. Number 5. Gordy's own home became a film set. One of the film's most emotionally heavy scenes wasn't shot on any studio lot. It was shot inside Berry Gordy's actual house. Most of Lady Sings the Blues was filmed across major studio lots like Universal and Warner Brothers, along with assorted California locations. But for one pivotal sequence, Gordy opened up his own private residence to the cast and crew. His home became the drug rehabilitation clinic where Billie Holiday, having checked herself in to fight her heroin addiction, gets arrested and dragged back out by police. It's a gutting moment in the story, made more layered by the fact that Louis McKay had secretly been paying for her treatment without her even knowing. Turning a personal residence into a working film set is not a small ask. It meant opening private space to lighting rigs, camera crews, and a full production schedule just to get the exact tone Gordy wanted for this one sequence. It also reflects how much control Gordy had seized over the entire project by this point, especially after buying out Paramount's stake. Shooting in his own home meant no studio rental fees and no outside time constraints, giving the cast the freedom to take as long as they needed to nail the emotional weight of the scene. It's a strange bit of trivia on its own, but it says a lot about just how personally invested Gordy was in getting this story right. Number 6. Real Billie Holiday musicians played on the soundtrack. The soundtrack of this film has a secret weapon, and it's not Diana Ross. It's the musicians standing behind her. Several performers who had actually shared stages and recording sessions with the real Billie Holiday were brought in to record the instrumental tracks for the film's soundtrack, creating a direct musical link between the movie and the woman it was portraying. Trumpeter Harry Sweets Edison, who had worked alongside Holiday during her career, brought his authentic tone into the sessions. Guitarist John Collins, another former Holiday collaborator, added his own guitar and banjo work, while bassist Red Holloway rounded out the ensemble with a deep, lived-in understanding of Holiday's sound. All of it was pulled together under conductor and arranger Gil Askey. Meanwhile, Diana Ross had pre-recorded every vocal track before filming even started, blending her own distinctive style with subtle phrasing choices that echoed Holiday's delivery, without ever trying to be a direct impression of her voice. Bringing in musicians who'd actually stood next to Holiday gave the soundtrack a layer of authenticity that went far beyond just recreating the era's sound. It paid off commercially, too. The album became Motown's fastest-selling record up to that point, hit number 1 on the Billboard album chart in 1973, and held that spot for 2 weeks straight. A whole new generation discovered Billie Holiday's music through a soundtrack built by the very people who once played beside her. Number 7. Dorothy Dandridge was originally cast. Before Diana Ross ever stepped into this role, there was another actress Hollywood had been trying to cast for almost 2 decades. Dorothy Dandridge was attached to star as Billie Holiday in multiple planned adaptations of the singer's autobiography throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, but she died before any of them made it to production. Hollywood had wanted this story on screen almost as soon as Holiday's autobiography published in 1956. Producer Lester Cowan and director Anthony Mann pitched an early version that same year with Dandridge as their first choice, producer Philip Waxman secured a verbal agreement with her in 1959 for another attempt. Producer Albert Zugsmith planned yet another version in 1960, one that would have started life as a Broadway musical before becoming a film. Across every single one of these failed attempts, Dandridge remained the consistent frontrunner, viewed as the natural fit given her status as one of the most prominent black actresses of her generation. But none of these productions ever got off the ground, and Dandridge passed away in 1965 at just 42 years old, closing the door on her ever playing the part. It would take another 7 years before Lady Sings the Blues finally reached theaters, with Diana Ross stepping into a role that had been meant for someone else entirely. Number 8. Modern hairstyles appear in 1930s scenes. Watch the background of any Harlem street scene closely and you'll spot an era that doesn't belong there at all. Lady Sings the Blues is set primarily in the 1930s and 1940s, but plenty of the black male extras in the background are sporting hairstyles that were popular in 1972, the year the movie was actually filmed. Look closely and you'll notice large afros and prominent sideburns scattered throughout crowd scenes in Harlem clubs and city streets. Both styles were signature looks of the early 1970s Black Power movement, not Depression-era Harlem. During the actual time period the film depicts, black men typically wore their hair much shorter and closer to the head, with styles like conks being far more common among performers of that era. The afro specifically became a powerful symbol of black identity during the civil rights movement of the 1960s into the 1970s, which makes it distinctly a product of that decade, not the one before Holiday's rise. This kind of slip happens in a lot of period films, when budgets or scheduling don't allow every single background extra to be styled with total historical precision. It's a small detail, but it's the kind that pulls a sharp-eyed viewer right out of the moment. It's a reminder that even a film this ambitious couldn't control every frame down to the last extra in the crowd. Before we keep going, subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling me which movie or show you want me to cover next with strange behind-the-scenes facts. I read every single one. Number 9. Suzanne de Passe made Oscar history. One woman working behind the scenes on this film made Oscar history before the movie even hit theaters, and most people have never heard her name. Suzanne de Passe earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Screenplay for Lady Sings the Blues, becoming the first African-American woman ever nominated in any non-acting category in the history of the Academy Awards. De Passe was working as Berry Gordy's creative assistant at Motown when he asked her to review the original screenplay, written by Terrence McCloy, and give her honest opinion. She came back with roughly 100 notes on things that needed fixing, which led Gordy to bring her on to rewrite the script directly, alongside director Sidney Furie and fellow Motown artist Chris Clark. De Passe later said the original draft contained stereotypical and even offensive material that needed to be reworked entirely to build a more respectful portrait of Holiday's life. One line she specifically remembered cutting had Billy telling Louis to touch your balls for luck over the phone, something she found both cliché and disrespectful to the characters. She and Clark pushed the script towards something more romantic and dignified, adding softer touches like the scene where Billy gifts her mother a red hat. The 1973 Oscar nomination recognized all three writers together, but De Passe's presence on that list was historic on its own. As of 2022, she remained one of only 2 African-American women ever nominated for a screenplay Oscar. A rewrite meant to fix someone else's script ended up rewriting the record books instead. Number 10. Levi Stubbs turned down the lead male role. Berry Gordy's first choice for the film's male lead wasn't an actor at all. It was one of Motown's biggest singing voices, and he said no. Levi Stubbs, the powerful baritone lead singer of the Four Tops, was Gordy's original pick to play Louis McKay opposite Diana Ross. But Stubbs turned the role down, and it had nothing to do with his acting ability. The Four Tops were riding one of the most successful runs in Motown's history through the 1960s and into the 70s. And Stubbs was the unmistakable voice behind their string of hits. When Gordy approached him, the timing simply didn't work. The group was scheduled to tour Europe during the film's entire production window, making an extended shoot impossible. But there was a deeper reason too, one that says a lot about who Stubbs was. Throughout his career, he consistently turned down any opportunity that would have separated him from the Four Tops or given him solo billing above his bandmates. He didn't want to overshadow the group he'd built his career alongside. That loyalty meant passing on what could have been a star-making film role. It also meant the door stayed wide open for Billy Dee Williams to step in and launch a major film career of his own. Sometimes the biggest opportunities go to the person who's still standing there after someone else walks away from it. Number 11. No famous jazz musicians appear in the film. This film tells Billie Holiday's story as if she built her entire career completely alone. In reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. None of the legendary musicians Holiday actually shared stages and studios with ever appear in the film in any form, and that's a long list to leave out entirely. In real life, Holiday recorded and performed alongside some of the biggest names jazz has ever produced, including Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, Teddy Wilson, Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, Lester Young, Johnny Hodges, and Ben Webster. Perhaps the most glaring omission of all is John Hammond, the producer and talent scout who discovered Holiday singing in a small Harlem club and helped launch her entire career. He's never even mentioned. Cutting these figures from Holiday's story became one of the most common criticisms music historians and jazz fans leveled at the film after its release. The filmmakers never officially explained the decision, though many have speculated it came down to legal and rights concerns, since several of these musicians were still alive in 1972 when the film was shooting. Whatever the reasoning, the choice to center the story almost entirely on Holiday's addiction and her relationship with McKay meant the film largely erased the rich musical community that actually shaped her life and her sound. It's one thing to simplify a life story for the screen. It's another to remove the entire artistic world someone built their legacy inside of. Number 12. Diana Ross was pregnant during filming. Diana Ross was carrying a life-changing secret through most of this shoot, one that had nothing to do with the plot on screen. During filming, Ross was pregnant with her daughter Rhonda, while preparing for and shooting her very first feature film role, making an already demanding debut even more physically taxing. According to Ross's own memoir, principal photography began on December 6, 1971, and continued into January of 1972, which means she was in her early months of pregnancy through the bulk of the shoot. That timing carried real consequences once the promotional push began. By the time Lady Sings the Blues hit theaters in October of 1972, Ross was heavily pregnant, which limited how many advance interviews and appearances she could do to promote what was supposed to be her big Hollywood breakout. She was so close to her due date that she couldn't even attend the film's glamorous New York premiere. Ross gave birth to her second daughter, Tracy Ellis Ross, on October 29, 1972, just 3 weeks after the film opened, while it was still building momentum toward becoming a box office success. Instead of walking a red carpet, she waited at home for Berry Gordy to call her after the premiere and describe how it went. He summed the whole night up in a single word: proud. She helped carry a phenomenon into the world while carrying her own child at the exact same time. Number 13. The film was shot in sequential order. Most movies get filmed completely out of order. This one didn't, and that decision changed the film in ways nobody expected going in. Lady Sings the Blues was shot in complete chronological order from beginning to end, an unusual choice in an industry where scenes are typically filmed based on location access, actor schedules, and budget, not story sequence. Director Sidney Furie and the production team deliberately freebase filmed events in the exact order they unfold on screen, starting with the opening arrest and moving forward scene by scene as Holiday's story progressed. That decision turned out to be incredibly lucky. When the filmmakers realized how talented Richard Pryor was after shooting his very first scene, they were able to expand his character on the spot, writing him deeper into upcoming scenes as they went without ever needing to go back and reshoot anything already completed. It also helped Diana Ross, working through her first ever acting role. She experienced her character's emotional arc in the same order audiences eventually would, letting her performance build naturally instead of forcing her to jump between wildly different emotional states from one shooting day to the next. A scheduling choice most productions avoid ended up giving this film a more natural emotional flow than it might have had otherwise. Quick reminder to subscribe if you are enjoying these revelations, and tell me in the comments, do you know any strange fact about this movie that I didn't mention? Let's build the list together. Number 14. Excessive Oscar campaigning may have cost the award. Berry Gordy wanted Diana Ross to win an Oscar so badly, his own campaign may be the exact reason she lost it. Gordy launched an aggressive, expensive Oscar push for Ross ahead of the 1973 Academy Awards, taking out near-daily full-page ads in trade papers like Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, keeping her name constantly in front of Academy voters throughout the entire season. Oscar campaigning wasn't new to Hollywood, but the sheer volume and persistence of Gordy's push struck many as excessive, even a little desperate, and it started to rub some Academy members the wrong way. One Academy voter spoke to columnist James Bacon about the backlash directly. According to that voter, Ross had been a runaway lock to win Best Actress when she was first nominated. Then came the almost daily full-page ads. The voter admitted they still believed Ross gave the best performance of any nominee that year, but said the only way to push back against what felt like an over-the-top circus of campaigning was to cast a protest vote. That voter specifically said it was why they voted for Liza Minnelli instead, suggesting others may have made the same call, and possibly costing Ross the Oscar despite widespread acclaim for her performance in her very first film role. Sometimes the campaign built to win an award becomes the very reason it slips away, almost at the end, and the best is still coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. Bonus. Director Sidney Furie later sued over the soundtrack. Here's the fact almost nobody brings up when they talk about this movie, and it's a wild one. The film's own director ended up suing the studio behind it. In June of 1973, director Sidney Furie filed a lawsuit against Berry Gordy, Motown Productions, and other parties tied to the film, claiming he'd never been paid his rightful share of the massive revenue generated by the soundtrack album. That soundtrack wasn't a modest success. It became a genuine commercial phenomenon, reaching #1 on the Billboard album chart and becoming Motown's fastest-selling record up to that point in the company's history. That meant serious money was flowing in from record sales, and Furie believed his contract entitled him to a cut of it. Specifically, the lawsuit sought the publisher's share of the music revenue tied to the soundtrack, with Furie arguing his role as director legally entitled him to a portion of those profits, not just his director's fee. This dispute exposes something most viewers never think about. What happens when a film produces a soundtrack that outperforms the movie itself, especially when the studio behind the film also happens to own the record label profiting from it? The lines between film revenue and music revenue get blurry fast, and blurry lines invite lawsuits. Here's the part that makes it even stranger. The historical record never clearly shows how this lawsuit ended. There's no confirmed settlement, no public resolution, nothing. To this day, whether Furie ever got paid what he believed he was owed remains completely unknown to the public. A film built on ambition, chemistry, and a genuine gamble by Berry Gordy still ended with one final unresolved mystery hiding behind the music that made it a hit. And those were 15 strange facts about Lady Sings the Blues. This film mattered a lot more than most people give it credit for. It turned a first-time actress into an Oscar nominee, launched Richard Pryor and Dee Williams into bigger careers, and gave Motown its first real foothold in Hollywood. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, and comment which facts surprised you the most. And don't forget to suggest another movie that deserves a list of strange facts like this one. See you in the next video.